Chapter 13. I sat backstage ever so slightly envious of Boyd Brooks. He would be remembered for being a hardcore icon who fought and beat the best across the U.S. and Japan. He'd be remembered for being stabbed in the locker room by either a crazed fan or a two-bit promoter who couldn't afford to pay him what he was owed. I tossed the deerstalker to one side. If I was lucky, I might get away with not being remembered at all, but I had the sinking feeling that this dumb Headlock Holmes bit was going to follow me around until someone put me out of my misery. Marty came into the room, sat down across from me, and we listened in silence as Wyatt and Jericho went at it in a non-title match. Small-town USA were eating them up. I thought of Nina and shook my head. While it wasn't the tribute she would have wanted from me, it was one that would have had her pissing her pants for days. I left the hat and coat behind with my dignity, got up, and walked out. I asked Marty en route whether he wanted to get out of here, and he did. On our way towards the staff exit, we bumped into Delia. The bit had either gone down exactly how she'd planned, and I'd been the work the whole time, or she was pretty thick-skinned. "You two leaving already?" she asked. "I think we've achieved everything nobody's ever set out to," I replied. "Oh, yeah?" "Pretty thick-skinned." A thought occurred to me, so I ran with it and asked, "So you and Brick, are you two a thing?" "Me and Brick? God, no." I watched as the wrong end of the stick passed across her face. Her eyes set to neutral, and she continued. "I'm flattered, but you're a little old for a... You ever see him with a Native American woman?" That confused her. She shook her head, looked to Marty, smiled, and made herself a ghost. As we got to the exit, he cracked up and began cackling so hard he damn near lost his footing. On some level, had it not involved her death, Nina would have absolutely loved the predicament she'd stuck me with. I held the door open for Marty before walking to my rental. To my surprise, he was in step with me right up to the door. "You want a lift or something?" I asked. "I'm flattered, but I'm married," he replied. "Up your goddamn ass, Monroe." I got in, reached across, and popped the latch on the passenger side for him to climb in. He lit a cigarette, handed it to me, and then lit another for himself. "I am sorry, Marty," I said. "I should have come to see you when you were in the hospital. It was kayfabe. But then you got out, and I put it off because I didn't want to see you all fucked up like that. In a wheelchair, not being able to use your fucking legs. Then a week passed, and another. Before long, it was shameful, and then it was just easier to just not think about you at all. I understood that. Understood how it was easier to allow Frank to make demands of you and keep your head in the made-up world of GCW than pop the bubble and deal with the real shit. I understood the control shame had on a person. My 3-month tour of Japan was an exercise in pain and politeness, as a method of avoiding the shame I felt about what I had done to my friend. "I watched a tape of your match with Gozu," Marty added. "I saw what you were doing to yourself. I knew you were doing it for me. I was still mad at the time, but I saw it. Hopefully some of that'll be remembered when I'm gone, and it's not just that shit," I replied, pointing into the building. Marty promised me he would make it his mission to ensure it was only that shit, and we laughed. She'd brought us back together, our pal Nina. After we cleared the air, I offered to drop him off anywhere he wanted to go, but it turned out that he was fine with staking out Don's son. I was going to sit on him until he was either cleared of anything to do with Nina's death or brought in broken and sorry. "I'm up for that," he said. He had his old game face on. There was no talking him out of it, no backing him down. The marvelous one was still in there. "I can't really pay you, Marty. I'm kinda out here on my own dime on this one." She was my friend, too. Keep your money. Besides, I heard you've a little one on the way. I just hope the looks come from its mama." I laughed. "I'm with you there." We watched the stage door with only smatterings of conversation until the event let out. Several of the boys exited together. They were on their way into the night to deal out even more mayhem, only with more unpredictability. Brick appeared in a black leather jacket with fringe running the length of both sleeves. Delia, Rita, and Magnificent came through the door moments later, followed by the Pinzers. I jumped out of the Cadillac to follow them on foot. Marty pulled himself across into the driver's seat. I tailed 6 of them half a block to a single-level red brick bar called Choppers. Marty drove by, and I flagged him down. I jumped into the passenger seat and tilted the wing mirror so I could keep an eye on the exit. It felt unnatural to have someone else in the cabin with me. A lot of detective work was this, sitting in silence, patiently watching nothing happen, and doing so for long periods of time. It goes against everything you think you should be doing with company. To his credit, Marty seemed to know that without needing to be told. There were no attempts to punctuate the air with chit-chat or fill time with platitudes, time that could have you miss something important because you weren't patient or silent. I glanced in his direction to make sure he was still there. He sat perfectly still, impeccably silent, like a hunter. An hour after chucking out time, Brick & Co. staggered from the bar with a skinful of liquor and a white powder mustache. They flagged down 2 cabs and all but poured themselves into the back seats. Marty turned over the engine, and I told him to just keep to the speed limit and try not to get caught by any changing traffic lights. We tailed Brick back to his motel room and watched in darkness as he dropped his key 3 times, trying to stick it in the lock. We watched as the door went back into its frame, and the dark of the rental room swallowed him up. I told Marty to get some sleep as I would take the first shift. He popped the seat into a reclined position, took off his jacket, and balled it up to make a pillow. In the blink of an eye, he was out, and I was returned to myself and my thoughts. As Marty slept next to me, I allowed the joy of reminiscence to take me back there. Back to Japan. Back to the pain and politeness of it all. I initially went there because it was work, and after Frank refused to renew my contract for knocking out marvelous Marty Monroe, I needed work. Few territories in the U.S. wanted anything to do with me. When I got there, I realized that another reason I had said yes to the FWF was because it got me as far away from my shame as I could get. When I touched down, the FWF owner and multiple-time champion Haru Aoki informed me how they would like to honor me with the Feudal Wrestling Foundation's Warrior Championship, a title bestowed onto a foreigner only once before in their history. It was indeed a great honor, but the key words in Haru's sales pitch was that they would like to, meaning that if I didn't cut the cloth in their planned bouts for me, it wouldn't see a Caucasian waist until the likes of the Calgary Crusher came to their shores and left with a wealth of technique. I threw everything I had into winning the elite of FWF over before my misplaced luggage even arrived at my hotel room. I wrestled twice, sometimes 3 times a day, in 90-degree weather from the lip of the East China Sea until I could see Okhotsk. It's tradition to drop whatever title you may be holding when you're leaving a territory, meaning the quicker I impressed, the longer my reign as FWF Warrior Champion would be, before I had to put a local over en route to the airport. As my time with the company reached 1 month, I got the nod. This next match was going to be the one. I'd been booked to wrestle the champion, the Jade Dragon, in Osaka in front of 42,000 fans. The Japanese wrestling fans were worlds apart from their American counterparts. Heat wasn't really something they expressed. They'd watch a lot of your match cold, but when you did something real well, they'd clap excitedly and a lot of them would make a show of thanking you for your performance whenever they caught you at the stage door or a local restaurant. By the time I arrived in Osaka, my neck and knees were killing me. Short of a bottle of bourbon and a fistful of Demerol inside me, there wasn't much chance of me getting to my feet, let alone the top of the FWF pyramid. The Jade Dragon put me over in a technical masterclass in which we barely left the canvas. It brought me back to the days of high school wrestling, when my bones were perfect, and the only guilt I was carrying was that I was trying to make it with two of the cheerleaders at once. When I became FWF champion, I got the strap placed around my waist, a giant trophy I was going to have to disassemble to get back to the States, and a check for $10,000, U.S. I was walking on air for 2 days until I spied one of the trades carrying a photo of Marty on a stretcher being taken out of an arena. I bought a copy of the magazine. It was all in Japanese, so I went to the nearest cafe, and after some up to 20 minutes of wind-talking, I found someone with enough English that they were able to give me the rundown on what had taken place. Marvelous Marty Monroe's return to the squared circle was cut short after he appeared to suffer an epileptic seizure on his way to the ring. Monroe was due to appear at Tampa, Florida's WrestleWorld event, at the end of the month. No update has been given by either the wrestler or the promotion. The following day, I went to Haru's office and asked him to sign my 10 grand check over to Sonia Monroe and mailed it back home. From that moment on, I wrestled all comers in any kind of match they wanted, under any conditions they required. My only stipulation was a good payday, the majority of which I posted back to Sonia. That match against the giant Gozu, the same one Marty had hate-watched, before that Headlock Holmes bit, I had hopes that that match against that South Korean giant would be the match that people turned to when I was no longer topside. He was a specialist in brutal bouts. For me, barbed wire ropes and small amounts of explosives embedded in the turnbuckles was a once-in-a-lifetime showcase to point to whenever anyone queried my credibility as a tough guy. For Gozu, it was Tuesday. When I met him to sign the contract, I noticed that he was missing the tips of 3 of his fingers across both hands. By the end of our 40-minute match, I understood why. Having been suplexed through 2 sheets of glass, I got to my feet, with a back filled with slivers. Shards stuck out of me from damn near every angle. This was his idea of an appetizer. The balance of the bout went back and forth between us in a deliciously delicate balance of technique and brutality. To my surprise, he was as skillful a wrestler as I'd ever worked with. When he signaled for the go-home, I wrapped a baseball bat with barbed wire, set it on fire, and beat the giant Gozu into a pulp. Afterwards, we met backstage. You couldn't have squeaked out a fart in that theater. Such was the silence. Every fan in the venue stood motionless with large O-shaped mouths. Gozu thanked me for honoring him with a great bout. He'd fought many foreigners and many champions, but had never been honored with fighting the man holding the FWF Warrior strap. After an acceptable amount of time basking in what we'd accomplished, Gozu slunk back to his room where they patched him up. He had a few nights off after that for his wounds to heal before he did it all again. The medic staff tried to shepherd me to one of the treatment rooms, but I was beaten and wanted to just go back to my hotel room. If I sat in their treatment room, it would be another hour before I got back to my safe space. I told the medic, "You'll come back with me. Patch me up there so I can go straight to bed." I cobbled together my gear and shuffled out of the arena before the event finished. I needed my safe space. I needed not to offend my host, but if one fan tried to pose for a picture with me, hanging together by sweat, I might have done something that would have limited my options to earn money even more. When my hotel was in sight, I felt the last of the adrenaline leave my body. All that was left was pain and blood loss. The medic's trained eye saw that I was wobbling, and she got herself under my arm and kept me upright until we got inside, upstairs, and to my room. I took my position on the edge of the bed, slumped forward in a soon-to-be spoiled Nagasaki hotel room. The medic left. I looked up in a helpless fright. I still had half a window lodged in my back. Was I not clear? She returned before I could summon the energy to get to my feet, handing me an ice pack for my knee. I thanked her as she gloved up and climbed onto the bed behind me with an ice bucket and her medical bag. She pulled a shard from the meaty part of my back, and I felt the cool air kiss the exposed flesh it left behind. I was in for a long night, so I did what I always did after a show and called Marcella. "That you, baby?" asked Marcella. "Yeah, it's me. Ouch!" I grit my teeth as a particularly large sliver was pulled from somewhere around my shoulder blade. I felt a warm rush of fluid run down my back and pool in my pants. "You okay?" "I'll live, I guess. I just wanted to hear your voice before I curled up in bed with a hot tea and a book." Mars laughed. "You're so full of shit. I know how you guys operate." "I miss you. No hookers and blow for me. I'm just looking forward to getting home to you," I confessed. "That's sweet. What's it like out there? Outside of the ring, obviously." "It's different here. There's a lot to see. I think I'd like to come back here when I'm not working, just to see it all, you know?" "My dad was stationed in Japan after the war. He never really talked about it," Marcella offered. I said I'd take her with me. I meant it, even though I knew deep down that it was unlikely we'd ever get there together. Another sliver of glass hit the basin. I took a glance at it. It had the look of a deconstructed church window. I popped the lid off a plastic container and poured the time-release painkillers into my mouth before crunching them with my back teeth and washing them down with liquor. I knew Marcella wouldn't approve, and it felt like cheating on her. "How many more nights before you're home?" she asked. "Another night here. Then Hiroshima, Himeji, and Nagoya before I'm back in Tokyo, then home. I'll pick you up at the airport. I can pour what's left of you into the back seat." "That would be nice." The basin chinked as glass clipped off the rim on the way down. "What was that?" "Just the ice in my drink is all." I lied. "Did you hear about the releases at GCW?" I had not. "Frank had to release like 10 of the guys over there. Something to do with losses he made from the stock market crash. You got out at the right time, babe." "You're right." Marcella's arms reached around from behind and grabbed hold of my chest. She leant in and kissed my neck and whispered, "All better." And I was. I turned to face her and saw she was wearing a sexy Halloween version of her nurse's uniform that gave me a glimpse of her underwear and two fat eyes full of cleavage. She pulled me in and kissed me. I kissed back. We added tongue, and things started to get real heated. Marcella reached down into my blood-drenched trousers and grabbed hold of my excited pud. I pulled her large breasts from the uniform and said, "I must be dreaming." "You are, baby. Time to wake up," she soothed. My eyes shot open, instantly alert, if still adjusting. Marty was still unconscious, so any awkwardness over the tent in my trousers was skillfully avoided. The hiss of the hydraulics, belonging to the large white bus that had pulled up, brought my attention back to the motel. I watched as the rosters stumbled out of their rooms and boarded the bus. Rochelle stood by the front of the vehicle, with a clipboard checking off names like a classroom assistant on a field trip. Brick staggered forward, his eyes still raw from the dead sleep he'd managed. The bus hissed again as the door lifted, moved and returned to its frame, with everyone on board. The GCW Roadshow was in motion again, en route to its next location. I walked to the nearest coffee shop and picked up 2 tall black ones and some bear claws. I set one of each in front of a slumbering Marty Monroe before I entered another motel front office. "Hey, I'm with GCW. Brick Hansen was meant to get me a copy of the credit card receipt for the room so I can claim it back against company expenses, but he's just jumped a bus to God knows where without getting me it. He's always doing this, and I can't afford to be out any more money. Can you help me out?" The young girl working the counter could care less for my story. I could have told her the truth, as long as I promised to leave immediately and no longer bother her. "What was his name again?" She sighed. "Brick Hansen." She typed away on the computer before asking, "Oh my God, are you a wrestler?" "Yeah," I said. "Would I have seen you?" "God, I hope not." The dot matrix printer chewed up the silence before spitting out Brick's credit card information. She tore it off and handed it to me before wishing me a splendid day. I left the office as promised and headed to the nearest payphone. Phoning through to the Venice PD, I navigated the switchboard politics of the desk team and ended up on the waiting line for the one cop I considered a friend. I had seen him around my gym, but never took him for a rank and file member of the Boys in Blue. One day, while tracking down a bail jumper, I saw him in uniform. He was going door to door asking about a little girl who had been plucked up into thin air on her way home. I blew off my job to help him track her down and had her home in time for bed. "Chris, it's Jack Gecko. I've an ask. Can you run a credit card for me? I need to know his spending over the last week or so." There was hesitation in his breathing. "Shit, Jack. 2 in a week. If this gets flagged, I could lose my badge." I had another way to get what I wanted, so I didn't push the subject. Instead, I confirmed a loose gym date when I got back to L.A. and promised him no hard feelings. I'd get my favor out of him face to face. It was harder to say no that way. I made my way back to the rental car. Marty was awake and enjoying his hand-delivered breakfast. I slipped into the passenger seat beside him, groaning all the way. "Did we get him?" he asked with a mouthful of pastry. "Not even close." "So what's the plan?" "We're going to Stillwater," I said.